Hello everybody, teaching children with special needs. Today under this we are going to deal with the topic teaching children with multiple disabilities. The objective of this lesson is to understand the concepts and the characteristics of multiple disability and then to understand the teaching methods when dealing with a child with multiple disabilities. Multiple disability or multiple impairment. It can be determined as a combination of physical, sensory and cognitive impairments that can lead to severe interaction, communication and learning difficulties. For example, consider deaf blindness. It is a multiple impairment. Multiple disabilities means a student has more than one serious disability which may affect the mobility, the behavior, emotion or the sensory abilities of the child. What is severe or multiple disabilities? People with severe disabilities are those who are traditionally have been labeled as having severe to profound mental retardation. These people or the children or individuals require ongoing extensive support in more than one of the major life activities in order to participate in integrated community settings and enjoy the quality of life available to people with few or no disabilities. They frequently have additional disabilities including the movement difficulties, sensory losses and sometimes behavior problems also. Children with multiple disabilities may have a combination of various other disabilities that may include the speech disability, the physical disability, a learning and mental retardation, visual or hearing problem and brain injury is also possible. Along with multiple disabilities, they can also exhibit the sensory losses and behavior or social problems. Child with multiple disabilities are also referred as multiple exceptionalities with varying severity and characteristics. These students may exhibit weakness in auditory processing and have speech limitations. Physical mobility will often be an area of need for these children. These students or children may have difficulty attaining and remembering the skills and transferring these skills from one situation to another. Support is usually needed beyond confining to the classrooms. The children and youth with severe or multiple disabilities exhibit a wide range of characteristics depending upon the combination and severity of the disabilities and the person's age. Let us see what are the characteristics of the multiple disabled individual or child. The first one is they have limited speech or communication. They have difficulty in basic physical mobility. They have the tendency to forget skills through disuse. They have trouble generalizing the skills from one situation to another, and there is a need for support in major life activities. The students with severe or multiple disabilities may exhibit any number of combinations of the characteristics which we have already studied. The severity of the cognitive delay or additional disability like the vision or hearing impairment or the communication difficulties or the physical disabilities affecting the mobility coordination or fine motor coordination, language delays and speech problems, limited or no verbal communication skills, lack of basic physical mobility and limited self-care skills, problems with attention, perception, memory and problem solving and poor retention skills, slow rate of learning, difficulty of transferring generalized skills learned in one situation to another situation, self-stimulation, self-injurious behavior, ritualistic behavior, inability to attend or relate to other people and medical problems like seizures or cerebral palsy or sensory loss or sometimes hydrocephalus can also be present in multiple disabled child. So, now we understood what is multiple disability and what can be the other disabilities associated with one disability. The children with multiple disabilities show various characteristics. Let us have a quick look at these characteristics. The first one is vision problems. 75 to 90% of our understanding about the world comes through our eyes. Children who can see and they are looking around, remembering things that they see every day and happening around them and learn about the world. But a child with of multiple disability, he cannot see the world and he will not be able to relate to what is happening and learn from the immediate environment. For example, take a child, a baby who sees the mother with a bottle knows that the mother is going to feed him, but a child with a vision problem who is not able to see, he does not know the way the mother is picking up and why the mother is coming with a bottle to him. So, this is the way a blind child, the object appears and disappears without the child's knowing from where it is coming from. Days become a series of magic tricks for them. As children grow, some of them appear to always squeeze their eyes together to look at something closely or to keep looking at their moving fingers or paper or bump into things while they are walking, and they also complain too much of light all the time. Their eyes may look different from the normal eyes. So, this is the problem a multiple disabled child has with the vision. Now, let us see what are the hearing problems. The hearing loss cuts a child away from the people around him. Thousands and thousands of conversations takes place around us every day. But a deaf child is not part of talking the world. If we do not take a special care to include him in this conversation, he will be limited in his conversation. And his learning will also get limited from the immediate environment that he can see in front of him. A boy walking around in the playground may miss the jokes made by his friends. He does not know about the sounds made by different vehicles on the road that he sees them, but he is not able to hear. Sometimes these children take long time and repeated training is required to develop speech in these children because of the hearing problem. And mostly they can speak or they may only repeat what they hear. They may also learn to adapt to their routine environment by guessing the conversation going around, but may actually face a lot of difficulty in a new place with unknown people. Now, after the vision and hearing problem, let us see what are the learning problems a multiple disabled child will face. Because of the combined loss of one or more than disabilities, the rate and speed of learning of these children is very slow. The presence of mental retardation also makes it difficult for the child to understand and remember the different actions and objects happening around them. Learning often becomes repetitive and meaningless unless special care is taken to make the child feel about exploring the world around him. The children are not motivated to move around or participate in the action taking place around them. This is because the incomplete information about the world. The adults also, they do not try to make things simpler for the child to understand and no previous example to remember or repeat. Children develop their unique style of learning different from the normal children. Even the children with single disability also or a multi-handicapped children also, they have a limited ideas of playing with toys or things around them. They may fix to one particular toy or one household object and want to hold it and play with it all the time instead of having different objects or different playthings. Then we will see the communication problems in a multiple disabled child. It is probably the one area that is more significantly affected in children with multiple disabilities. Lack of hearing, limited view about the world around and little opportunity to move and explore things for self and severe medical conditions all add up to the child having a very distorted perceptions about the world around him. children often do not realize what is going on around them and how they can be part of their family or school's daily life. And the methods these children may use in communication can be gestures, signs, body movements, vocalizations, etc. And they may not be able to understand by others. Thus, the people around them do not attempt to interact with the multiple disabled or handicapped children, thus making the world a very narrow and lonely place for these children with multiple disabilities. Now, let us see what is the posture and mobility problems these children are having. Our sight, hearing and body movements help us to move around without bumping into things, remembering the way to reach the places, or even to use our own hands to hold and look at the things. The presence of cerebral palsy or locomotor disabilities or balance difficulties makes it hard for the child to manage his own body movements, and sometimes it becomes very difficult to use his body to move from one place to another place. Lack of vision or hearing, or sometimes both, leads to the deaf blindness and also results in odd postures in the children. For example, children may not be interested to keep their heads straight because they cannot see or hear anything. Head bending, curling up like a tight ball, or head tilting to one side are some of the postures regularly seen in children with multiple disabilities. So, these are some of the characteristics we can find in children with multiple disabilities. Let us now move on to see what are the educational implications when dealing with a multiple disabled child. Early intervention programs, preschool and educational programs with appropriate support services are very much important to these children with severe or multiple disabilities. Educators, physical therapists, occupational therapists and speech language pathologists are all the members of the team that may provide the services along with others as needed for each individual child. Assistive technologies like the computers or alternative communication devices and techniques may provide a valuable instructional assistance while educating these children with severe disabilities or multiple disabilities. In order to effectively address the considerable needs of the individuals with multiple disabilities, educational programs need to be incorporated into a variety of components, including the language development, the social skill development, the functional skill development and vocational skill development. Related services are also of great importance, and appropriate therapists like the speech and language occupational therapists, behavior therapists and recreational therapists need to work closely with the classroom teachers and parents. The best practices indicate that related services are best offered during the natural routine of the school and community rather than by removing the student from the class for isolated therapies. The classroom arrangement must be taken into consideration the students' needs and the medications, the special diets and special equipment. Adaptive aids and equipment enable the students to increase their range or working of the functioning. The inclusion with non-disabled peers is an important component of the educational setting. Research is showing that attending the same school and participating in the same activities as their non-disabled peers or non-disabled children is crucial for developing social skills and friendships for the children and youth with multiple disabilities. Traditionally, children with multiple disabilities have been educated in the center-based, which are segregated schools. However, recently many schools are effectively and successfully educating children with severe disabilities in their own neighborhood schools with regular classroom, making appropriate support services and curriculum modifications that can be helpful for the child with multiple disabilities. Community-based instruction is an important characteristic of the educational program, particularly as the student is growing and increasing time is spent in the community. And in the light of the current Vocational Rehabilitation Act and the practices of supported employment, schools are now using school to work transition and planning and working towards the job placement in an integrated competitive settings. We can see some recommendations for the teachers and parents. Early intervention is a necessary. As soon as the child begins the school, early intervention programs should be started, and involvement of appropriate professionals like the physical therapist, the occupational therapist, the language therapist should be made available for the child. A team approach at the school level involving the external agency or community who can meet on a regular basis is also very essential. The physical arrangement of the classroom will need to be the best to accommodate the child with disabilities. Integration among their peers is important to assist these students with social development. So, these are some of the recommendations that are required when having a multiple disabled child with early intervention and with the help of other specialists or the appropriate technologies are required. The learning needs of a multiple disabled child we will see with visual impairment. So, now we are going to see the learning needs of a multiple disabled child if he is having a visual impairment as one of the disability. Multiple disabled with visual impairment, they fail to search and explore the environment on their own. They are confused about the environment around them and often they withdraw from the environment. And simple day-to-day skills like eating, dressing, washing will become difficult to learn as they often cannot learn by imitating or looking at the others. They have to be simply taught by others. Now, let us see what are the characteristics of learning environment. Isolation. This is a big obstacle in learning as children are either not aware of what is going on in the environment around them or they do not understand the role of it. Individual instructions. Due to many different problems faced by the children and the need to bring the world closer to the children, the child with multiple disabilities, individual instructions will be of great helpful to a great extent. Close physical proximity also makes the child feel secure and safe to explore the world by themselves. The next one is reliance upon the interpreters. Communication need is a primary need for the child with multiple disability having visual impairment. And not all the persons around the child will know how to use the gestures, signs or specific sounds and objects while talking with the child. So, the child therefore needs people around them who can be a link between them and the world. This limits their experiences and learning. Then limited social experiences. Fear from both the sides, the adult and the multi-handicapped child because of the limited communication methods makes it difficult to know each other better and develop a relationship. Multiple hospitalization. Children may need to get medical care very frequently at the hospitals. Because of this, there are frequent breaks in their schooling and other training courses. Bonding. The effect of multiple disabilities at birth or at very young age leaves the mother confused and fearful. The child also does not reach out to the mother as newborn child would do. The detachment between the mother and the child begins at a very early age itself. Establishing ideas and concepts. The children with multiple disabilities, especially the visual impaired child or deaf blindness child, have a great challenge in remembering the objects and actions when the same are not in front of them to touch them all the time. For such a child, an object does not exist if he is not touching it. Restricted mobility. The limited ability to move around because of the poor motor development or cerebral palsy or other locomotor difficulties reduces the chances of the child to move around and explore the things by themselves or learn about their environment. Reduced motivation. Multi-handicapped child in general shows very low interest to move around and explore things for themselves. This is because either their motor problem or lack of seeing or hearing or image of the world. These are some of the problems a multiple disabled child with visual impairment will be having or facing. The family members and the teachers, the caregivers or the therapists, all they have the constant challenge on their hands to provide a clear and precise information to this child who is multiple disabled and visually impaired. At times, the adults need to act as if their eyes and ears and hands of the child to understand what is going on to be meaningful and relevant while teaching the child. It is also essential that a good emotional relationship to be maintained between the multi-disabled child and his caregiver, because it is the person and not the specific training activity that will be motivating the multi-handicapped or multi-disabled child and try to do the things. It will be helpful for the child to feel successful at every attempt that he is going to take. And the role of the caregiver is understanding what interests the child and how long he can keep the child's attention. And sometimes the physical energy at a particular task is also important consideration. Mother, father, the siblings, the grandparents, the therapists, the teachers, the doctors, the community workers all become a part of teaching and learning world for the multi-handicapped child. Giving choices for communication, problem solving, exploration and independent mobility will be the key areas. It is important to think about the ways to help the child to know what will be helpful for the child to learn in his life. Each attempt while teaching the new skill in the life needs to be focused on the multi-handicapped child's residual senses and other remaining strengths. Building the learning activities into the child's regular day-to-day life helps him to understand the use of the newly learned skills better. It will help the multi-handicapped or multi-disabled child to use the newly learned skills within his immediate routines. Reward and reinforcement are very basic to the learning environment while teaching the child with multiple disabilities. Now, let us see quickly what are the guidelines developed for teaching the multi-disabled child with visual impairment. The first guideline is independence is the goal. No matter how small or big is the task, the child should learn to use it to make his life easy and simple for him. Teach the skills that are functional and meaningful. Because of limited opportunities available for the child, it is wise to teach him the things that are directly related to his environment. Teach skills in a natural setting. This point can never be stressed enough number of times. The child is able to remember things that they learn while going through the day-to-day routines. Break the task into small steps. Small steps will help the child to practice better and remember better. Provide assistance as needed. Encourage the child in every attempt. Do not laugh or scold the child when he is trying his best. Speak to the students using normal language and voice. They would be able to understand that. We should not shout or scream or order them because we are trying to teach them and they will not be able to understand our voice modulations. Develop routines. Having fixed timetable for the day for the child. This helps the child to have more control over his life and anticipate what is going to happen next to him. Multi-sensory approach it is best to make the use of all the remaining sensory abilities of the child. Plan inclusive activities. With highly individualized activities being planned for the child, there is always a risk that either the parent or the caregiver is constantly trying to teach the child. Remember, it is important for the child to know what others are enjoying doing and for him that to be a part of that activity. Make use of the resource persons from the community. For example, an old grandmother from the neighbor's house or a local chowkidar or even the school gardener can teach the child something essential in his life. Take the best advantages of these teachers. So, this is some of the important teaching tips for the child with multiple disabilities, mostly having a visual impairment as one of the disabilities. Now, let us move on to see what are the practical tips for the teachers. The first step would be to find out how much residual hearing or vision the child is having. If the child is having a residual vision or hearing, we need to try to make use of it to create communication, encourage learning and participation of the child. If the child offers to share his or her toys with others, we should follow what his or her hands are doing and share the child's exploring hands. We should make use of the hands available to the child next and allow the child use his own hands rather than directing his hands. We should follow the child's lead. We must acknowledge and try to interpret the communication efforts of the child before we can expect the child to understand our formal signs. If a child has very few signs, we should accept his or her signs by imitating them under his own hands rather than modeling the sign of what we think is he or she is trying to tell us. If the child is sufficient functional vision, we should model the signs within his field of vision. We should try to build on the child's own communication by developing a more formal system when the child is ready. This approach will foster a trusting relationship between the child by giving more control of the child, allowing him to learn more of his communication. So, today we have learned about teaching the child with multiple disabilities. We started with the concept of what is multiple disability and what are the characteristics of a multiple disabled child. What are the problems a multiple disabled child may be facing, like the vision problem, hearing problem, the mobility problem, and then we try to understand the educational implications that are required for a child with multiple disability, and specifically we try to understand multiple disabled child with visual impairment. We have understood some teaching methods for a child with multiple disabilities and also some practical tips for the teachers when dealing with a multiple disabled child, especially with hearing and vision problems in an inclusive class. Hope you have understood the lesson. Thank you.